this is a brand new mission statement for us. Our organization has just gone through 5 years of transition, a very important transition. So I'll take you a little bit through there so that you can understand how we've come to this particular mission statement. So I don't have it memorized yet, but the goal is that we want to support, as an organization, as a foundation, as an investment organization, supported by private money, to build a smarter community, a more sustainable community, innovative programs that support kids to be ready for post-secondary choices. So that's who we are, and I'll get better at that. We started out 25 years ago. We're a 25-year-old organization, which a lot of people are like, what? I've never heard of you guys. How does that mean? Well, we started out as a foundation that really came about because tax dollars didn't pay for all the extras in the schools. That hasn't changed. I think when they first started, they weren't sure that it would even have to be around for very long, but the problems are the same. But the goal of the program at that time, and with most education foundations that started in the 80s, was to support the classroom, support the schools in the extras. It was almost, in fact, criticized because education foundations were glorified PTAs. They were kind of paying for the stuff that the district couldn't pay for, that the district didn't necessarily seem was essential. There was also another type of education foundation that came out of the 80s as well, and that was the watchdog group. A lot of those in California, big money, and they had a focused issue. For example, if the schools weren't taking care of after-school programming, or there were political issues, then this group on the outside of the system would keep track and watch and make sure that the schools were doing what they're supposed to do, et cetera, et cetera. Well, we kind of fell right in the middle. We are an independent organization with an independent board of directors. We're a 501c3, fully charitable organization. But yeah, we had both superintendents sitting on our board. We cover both Champaign and Urbana schools. That also covers Savoy, Bonneville. It's in the county, it's not just the city boundaries. So we've always had an interesting role in the districts, but indeed consider ourselves extremely independent. We've been locked in together with both districts in various capacities of collaboration and cooperation in the last 25 years. But this is what people don't necessarily think about when they think about public education. It's a big business. It's a big business in our community. We have 27 public schools. We have about 14,000 kids in our schools. We're the 6th or 7th biggest employer. I guess, U of I obviously is the biggest. And it's a huge operating budget. There's a lot of money streaming in and out of our community because of the public schools. If we don't have healthy schools, we have an economic development problem. And so this is a major thing to consider when you think about, oh, I don't have kids in school, oh, I'm only here for a couple of years. We have a real issue with population turnover here in this community because, and it's actually figured out about 25% a year, or every 3 years we get a whole new cohort of people. And consequently, if you've never heard of us, it's probably because maybe you haven't been here very long, or you're one of the 80% plus people that doesn't have kids in the schools, or you're not engaged in the community at a civic level, where you're, running for political office, you're, one of those folks that contributes back in a civic way. So it's a big industry and we need to keep it healthy. So yeah, this is why we're here. I already mentioned it. It hasn't changed. We kind of got over the technology bubble for a while. Kathleen, you were part of this. We were funding teachers with technology. Because the districts just weren't there. And we wanted our kids to have kind of cutting edge access to various types of technology. And so the foundation really spent a lot of money on technology grants for teachers. We have a huge demand on special education here. We do it well in Champaign Urbana, and then consequently it draws people who want those services. So special ed, both from kids who are at the low end of the curve and kids who are at the high end of the curve, get a lot of attention and a lot of services. There's also been a huge demand for more social services, and our kids come in at all different levels. We have kids who are tracked in kindergarten to, you know, have their PhDs, and then we have kids who don't even know that they're part of a system and can identify colors. So kids come in a variety of levels of preparedness. And we have old buildings. We have pre-technology buildings. And so trying to retrofit the amazing things that are happening now in technology is a real challenge and costs a lot of money. So that's why we're here. We're here to be part of that. So we've just gone through this huge change. What we were in the past has been kind of a passive organization, and we hoped that people would come to us with great ideas, and then we'd fund them, or not. We'd go out and ask donors for money, and we'd say, you know, we just do great work. We just know teachers are fabulous, and we know they're going to come to us and ask us for money, and they're going to do a great thing. Well, it wasn't very strategic. And so one of the things that we've done now, and you're seeing happen all over the country, especially with nonprofits, is looking at how we disperse our funds strategically based on the outcome we're looking for. So it is, from that point of view, a real flip in what we used to do. We're much more proactive about what we want to fund and how we will do that. The other side of the coin is that Champaign Urbana, the schools have undergone a tremendous change in terms of who our students are. When we first started, we were supported by parents who had resources. There was a lot of wealth invested in the schools by parent group. Well, those kids have graduated, for the most part. They're adults themselves now, 25 years later. And what we have now in our schools, for many, many reasons, are kids who fall in the free and reduced lunch rate over 60 to 70% in both of our districts. That's huge. And it isn't our parent group anymore who's funding us. And in fact, it's a real threat to an organization like ours. So the only way we've been able to stay alive is take our case to the public. So this is an example of that. What we've had to do is completely shift that paradigm. We're not a glorified PTA. In fact, we have to convince the community they need us, because if we aren't supported, there are things that just won't be paid for. And no longer are we paying for the little extras in the classroom. We're paying for assessment tools. We're paying for support in the classroom. We're paying, we've gotten past the technology bubble, but now we're paying for programming. This is a whole new shift for us to get involved in programming and actually providing things. So right now, this is who we are. I mean, we have raised several $million. We have distributed $1.3 million in our 25-year existence, which isn't a lot of money, but if you think about over $500,000 has just been in the last 5 years. We've done a tremendous amount and intend to do more. But we do it with fundraising, we do it with conferences, we do it with some grant writing, and we meet one-on-one with potential donors to tell them how important it is that this community have a private organization raising funds for the schools. By the way, it's not a new idea. If any of you have ever participated or been in a sport or a club or a debate or something like that, booster clubs. That's private money in the schools, and they've raised millions of dollars over the years. So it's not a new notion to have private money in the schools. What do we do? Well, right at the moment we have programs. CUScholars is one that I'll be telling you more about in particular. We have what we call IDEA grants, and IDEA is standing for Invest, Develop, Elevate, and Achieve. And those right now are micro grants. They're about $500 or less. Those are the most popular with our teachers at this point. We used to have a pretty in-depth master grant program where we gave $4,000 to $5,000 to teachers through a pretty rigorous application program. Then we have an SOS fund, and that is an emergency fund for homeless public school students. We have had over 500 kids, unique serves, in the last few years and spent over $40,000 on emergency needs. And we're talking about a pair of shoes, or we're talking about lunch, or maybe a hotel room until they can get some kind of semi-permanent solution to their situation. This is not a problem we had 25 years ago. So it was something we never foresaw in our future. We also then own and operate the Idea Store. I brought a few brochures about that. I also brought some brochures of our newsletter. The Idea Store is an earned income social enterprise that's performing a function for us as a foundation and also for the community. So what we do is we interrupt the waste stream by reselling and repurposing objects that ordinarily would go in the landfill. We're talking about broken things and paper clips and rubber bands. So if you haven't been or haven't seen the Idea Store, you need to come and see it. It's an extraordinary thing. And I can spend a little more time on that too. So CUScholars. That's what I think that you probably want to hear the most about at this point in time. About 8 years ago, there were, and I should say too, there have always been really intelligent, engaged people who want to make our schools better and who want to be involved. And so it's interesting because we've gone through cycles of folks who want to do this in our existence. And I don't think we'd be here if we didn't have an engaged community. What we've found out and what we wanted to do when we saw the trend of how are we going to maintain quality access to quality programs for our students when our parent base shifted dramatically is how can we do that? And a lot of communities have done this in a number of ways. The demands on kids for what post-secondary choices haven't gotten any less, and in fact with these kind of numbers, they're enormous for a kid to go beyond high school. As you can see, 80% of the jobs are now considered skilled. That's actually gone up now since this slide was made. But it's a new idea for parents. And in fact, it's a new idea for our state of Illinois. If you think about the state, I don't know if you know what the high school graduation standards are in our state, but they're too low for anything post-secondary. If a student only takes the required state standards to graduate, they have to take remedial in anything they go do. Because math, not required to the extent that it should be. Foreign language, not required to the extent it should be. Lab science, not required the way it should be. It's remarkable. So what we found is that when our kids and families think, oh, my kid graduated from high school, yes, no. You can't even get into the military now without remedial. You can't get into any certification program, 2-year college program, 4-year college program without remedial if you're only taking basic standards. Well, that's a huge problem for our kids. Now, when we did the research at the beginning of the development of CUScholars, which was in 2009, 60% of our kids at the time were taking more than the high school standards. So that's a good thing. We didn't know where they fell in terms of that 60%, did they really take the rigor that's necessary to get into a 4-year college program. But that meant that 40% of our kids were only taking the minimum state standards. It's pretty significant when we know that 70% plus stay here in our community. 62% of our kids who go to Parkland College need remedial. They need remedial math and they need remedial science. So our kids leaving high school just simply aren't prepared. And they're staying here. They're our workforce. And the other number that's sort of shocking is 95% of our kids stay in Illinois. Illinois is one of the few states in the country that doesn't require financial literacy in the high school curriculum. And Illinois is bankrupt. So, you know, duh. So how can we, as this small community in the big picture, have an impact on our future? Well, in some ways, because we're small, we can. We can't fix the state. I'd like to, but that's not within the purview of this organization. But we can start to have an impact on our graduates. We've got 900 kids a year graduating from our high schools. That's it. We can fix that. 900 kids a year. So 3,600 at any time in high school. So the idea behind CUScholars, based on a federal program called State Scholars Initiative, was to voluntarily increase the rigor and ask kids to participate by defining a pathway that would give them more choices post-secondary. So if you follow this pathway starting in 9th grade, actually making a decision as an 8th grader, and hopefully this program will go on down, and we're already working toward that now with our new mission. Starting as a 9th grader, it's a clear pathway. You work with the counselors, you work with the teachers and the districts and the parents and the business community, and we all work together to raise the outcomes for our kids. That's the premise behind CUScholars. So the mission of CUScholars is to recruit, retain, and celebrate our high school kids who complete a certain set of benchmarks. These benchmarks have been supported by both school districts. We have a tremendous collaborative relationship right now. It's very positive. We've got counselors engaged. We have what we call a course of study committee that reviews what the curriculum is that's required by the state and then what's required by us, so that these kids are actually indeed getting more than what the state standards are requiring. We're supported by private business. We have 3 major what we call visionary sponsors because they believed in this before we launched. And those folks are investing private dollars into developing these kids. What we've learned too is that in this last year, we've seen a price per kid go down. We have almost 750 kids in the program now. We rolled this out 2 years ago. We're just now rolling in our class of 2017. We've never had a graduate yet. So, you know, it's like, okay, everybody, use your imagination because we have this great magic wand and this is going to be great. It's a difficult way to raise money. But as we get closer and as we've started to collect data now, we know that we're going to have an impact. To me, it's a no-brainer. You raise the academic rigor in a kid's life and require them to have a 95% attendance rate. You require them to maintain a C average or better, and they have to give volunteer service. You're developing a kid that might not in other ways be as successful. So to me, I'm sure our data will come up. Here's our current Illinois state standards. Now, I'm sure you're all aware that the we're talking about a national core. And of course, it's very controversial. We're just moving forward. And if and when the national core, which will indeed come and take place, then we will modify as necessary our curriculum. But this is what the state of Illinois requires right now. Good thing is that our social studies in both of our high schools is already better than the state standard. That was the only one. This is the information I already gave to you. We're pretty excited that our kids actually do better on the ACT than the state. This is what we're talking about with CUScholars Core. 4 years of English, and it has to include writing, which was optional before. 4 years of math, 3 years of lab science, social studies already squared away, and 2 years of the same foreign language. And that actually was the State Scholars Initiative. By the way, that was federally funded, now defunct. The states that were able to raise private funding are still doing some form of state scholars, particularly Tennessee. And it came out of Tennessee initially, and it was because of the great relationship they had with Eastman Kodak to develop a workforce, and it just wasn't happening in Eastern Tennessee. The other piece that is interesting is that all of our sister states participated in the State Scholars Initiative, just not Illinois. Came out of the National Chamber of Business, Chamber of Commerce, and the Illinois Chamber of Commerce was unable to adopt it. But Michigan did, and Iowa did, and Tennessee and Kentucky and all those other states did. And Michigan just raised their state standards. When it became a defunct program, they just raised their state standards. And they jumped in. Well, we aren't there. This is a CUScholars Basic. And who has the responsibility for it? We've got academic rigor. Well, as an organization outside of the district, we cannot regulate the academic rigor. What we can do is help the students understand how important that is, and we can work with the counselors. And what we have done is hire a liaison in each of our high schools, paid with private money, to be the CUScholars liaison. So we have 3 liaisons. They work with our CUScholars in each of the high schools. That's been essential. What we do, our organization, is we provide what's called freshman experience. It's required. We provide the sophomore year experience, that's required, and then we have a 6-week financial literacy course in the junior year. When they are finished with that, they will be certified, and then when they graduate as seniors, they will have that in their resume. We hope to develop scholarship funds to go along with this, and this community will understand that if they hire a CU scholar, they're getting that. It'll be a badge. They'll know. They're required to do volunteer service, and of course, we have to have businesses involved. We're looking for job shadows. We're doing an inventory of things that they're already doing so that we can kind of package the whole thing. And then we do business presentations. We just had every 8th grader in Champaign Urbana Schools just had a presentation on CUScholars. And they had it by a volunteer business person and their teacher and liaison in the building. And so they all had to hear it. And it was a fascinating thing. And of course, it's always a surprise to kids to understand that getting $17,000 a year just isn't going to get you a car. So, in fact, some of our counselors are surprised that $30,000 isn't going to get you a brand new car either. But one of the things that we're working on right now is our sophomore year experience, and we're haven't done one yet because that cohort is just coming. And we are doing a life simulation for those kids. They will be heavily involved for those sophomores. Parkland College is hosting it for us, going through the stations of life. And they'll get a debit card when they enter the room, and they'll have to work through various stations of experience to by the end of the day. And it will be a really fascinating thing for them to go through. And who is it for? Well, it's for everybody. It's a volunteer program. That was a big debate initially. Should it be just required? And at this point, we felt that once you start requiring things, then you have to start policing things. And we were in a situation where we really didn't want it to become a punitive experience. We want it to become a rewarding experience. So there are opportunities for struggling learners. The district has promised to have the supports in place for a kid who's struggling. The big challenge we have is getting the kid there. And if any of you are involved in math tutoring, it's getting, you know, you're sitting there. How many kids actually come to you and ask for help when you're over in the school libraries? It's very difficult to connect the kid to the service. Kids who want to be more involved, the beauty of it is we now have CUScholars volunteering at the Idea Store, so it's a nice full circle. Definitely opportunities for gifted and talented. The kid who's prepared by junior year can start earning college credits through the Parkland College dual credit program. And we have several kids who avail themselves of that. And in fact, we have a junior who will be our first CU Scholar graduate next year, so we are actually going to beat that 4-year cohort. School to employment and college bound, so it's for all of those kinds of kids. And then, okay, what's in it for me? That's always a big argument. There isn't a big cash carrot at the moment. We'd like there to be, but there isn't. And we've been told that actually most kids don't really have to have it. The parents want it, but kids are willing to do things for recognition, for celebration, for understanding that they're actually doing something that will help them in the future. Most kids really, I mean, it's very appealing. Plus, we have a lot of bling. Herf Jones is a partner of ours, and they've printed up tons of bling for us. We got documents, and we got bracelets, and we got dog tags, and we got stoles, and I mean, we got all kinds of stuff. We have also been told the bling is very important, so we'll square that away. And then, who's making it happen? We've got the districts, CUSF, Business, U of I, Parkland, and the community. And it can't be done unless it is done this way. None of us can act independently because these are our kids and this is our future. And the metaphor I use is the stone soup. If you're aware of that, you know, the traveler comes into town with a pot and a rock, right? It's empty. But as the citizens start bringing things to the pot, the broth gets richer and richer and better. That's what this is. That's at the core of this. If we participate together, then we're going to have a student who has more options when they graduate. And here's where we are. We've got 700 kids now. Our cost has dropped by more than half. That will be even more significant by next year. We've got our charter grads. We've acknowledged kids who've completed the academic portion of the program. And we have our 3 visionary sponsors. Just picked up County Market as our junior year financial literacy sponsor. We're definitely always looking for a sponsor. This program isn't going to get cheaper. And then I just wanted to tell you a little bit more about the other programs that we do. Our microgrant program, pretty significant. I mean, we've given a lot of money away. The Splash Grant and Idea Grant program has a tremendous amount of impact. This was about classroom. This is about making a difference in a classroom at the teacher classroom level. In some cases, we have funded grants that are district-wide or cross-classroom, cross-district, but for the most part, this is classroom. We also have our SOS fund. I told you a little bit about that. Pretty shocking and, that we do that at all. This is an example just of some of our partners. We can't do it alone. Private support in public schools is absolutely critical. Healthy communities have to have private support in their public schools. And then I thought I'd tell you a little bit about the Idea Store. But maybe before I go into the Idea Store, I can answer some questions, because we're at about 20 till, and I wanted to make sure that I had time for questions by 10 till, so maybe that would work.
Is there any connection to the mentoring program in the Champaign?
We are cooperative at this point in time and get along, but we're not the same organization. So, yeah. And in fact, I mean, it's a great piece of information for anyone working with kids to know that this is out there and a possibility for the kids they're mentoring.
And for the SOS program, how do you find out about students in need?
There was a federal block grant, McKinney-Vento Act, that came to the district several years ago that would fund homeless children the needs they have for school. So it will fund backpacks, it will fund pencils and bus passes, it will fund, you know, that kind of stuff, but would not fund food or shoes or anything like that. So these kids are actually identified through the McKinney-Vento Act in both of our districts. So it comes through the counselors for the most part. Some referrals from necessary services that are available. But it's actually an excellent referral service. So these kids are identified sometimes first run in the classroom because the teacher can tell, and then it's investigated, it's found out and then we can look at the numbers of free and reduced lunch, which is also a legal way of looking at free lunch in particular, that will substantiate that. So what we've been able to do is piggyback on the information that the districts have because of the McKinney-Vento Act and identify who needs instant emergency care. So that's how those kids are discovered. Yep. Any other questions about what I've, yeah?
I was just wondering about the program. My first question is it similar to the National Honor Society in that it requires like the GPA and the service hours? Like, is there a similar like application process?
There is no application.
There's no application?
No. All the kid has to do is commit to being a CU scholar. So what they do is register in their counseling office. In that regard, it's much different than the Honor Society. So it's available to all kids. And we're really excited about who's applying because these, we're getting obviously top-end kids. Why not, right? If it's one more thing you can check off on your college app, and you know, why wouldn't you do it? But we're also getting kids who really aren't celebrated any other way. You know, so I've just seen some, I had a kid come into the store the other day and he saw that it was run by the Schools Foundation. It was just your average kid. And he goes, I'm going to be in a program that's part of that. And I said, you are? I said, are you going to be a CU scholar? And he said, yeah. And he was just so proud of himself that he was going to be a CU scholar. And you could see he came in with his mom. And it's just like, yes, okay. So we're reaching all kinds of kids, and I'm just very excited about that.
Okay, and then I have one more question about, because you have like 4-year requirements and things like that. Are there opportunities for kids to graduate early with those requirements? Yeah,
and in fact, we'll have our first graduating junior next year. And the other thing we've looked in our course of studies committee has looked at is transfers and an unpublished appeal process that first year. So if a freshman is really having trouble, the superintendent has the opportunity to appeal. if we drop them. So, yeah, that comes up, especially with people moving in and out of the community.
You mentioned that you switched to a strategic plan. Usually when you have a strategic plan, you do some sort of what's called an environmental scan, and then you have what's called strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats.
The SWOT exercise. Yep.
What are potential threats to you achieving your goals?
Probably the biggest threat is lack of resources, is lack of a sustainable funding model.
Well,
So,
suppose you had resources. I mean, is there a definite implementable success model that you could use that would work for sure, or you have to wait for your outcomes?
I would say that our outcomes are critical, but it is based on the state scholars program, which has been successful. So we have tweaked it for our local community. It is not the same as the state scholars initiative. But we feel confident enough that if we're able to sustain what we're doing now and actually increase the rigor perhaps once we get this rolling, that we will be successful. We won't know for sure until we actually have some data on it. But in terms of biggest threat, it's got to be money. The second biggest threat is lack of cooperation from the schools. Right now we have a very cooperative relationship and collaboration. But we are an outside organization coming at them from the outside. And if the districts decided this wasn't a priority for them, then it would definitely be a threat to the program. So it requires collaboration. For one thing, they're the only ones, I've got up there, they're the only ones who have access to private information. And we aren't allowed to know which students what and that kind of thing because of the privacy laws. So it's essential that we have the counselors working with us. The other piece is just the counselors, we see them as major, great gatekeepers on this. If we had a counselor that said to the kid, hey, you want to do this program, we're done, right? I mean, the counselors actually, they need to believe in what we're doing, and they need to understand that this isn't a threat to their job. This is actually helping them. So that's also been something we've had and worked on very carefully. But in the long list of SWOT, the benefits to the program seem to far outweigh some of the risks. And again, we try to scale it out. Unfortunately, by the nature of rolling it out over the years of development, we started out with a fairly small group. And hopefully then, as we increase, we'll be more prepared to handle the things that come up.
I had a quick comment. I have a ninth grader now who started in this program. She filled out the paperwork for the 8th grade in medicine. And we really had no idea what the program was about. And she wasn't sure if she wanted to join. She's a very studious kid, and I have to say that the grades have, she's a great student, but volunteering was really not on her horizon of things she wanted to do. And so she recently, as the year is ending, she's getting a little pressure now. She realized that she has to fulfill these many volunteering hours, and she's actually actively looking for opportunities. So she signed up to volunteer at the Orpheum and with the Eber Fest, and she was looking at the Idea Store. So I'm really glad that this has come up on her radar, that this is an important thing to do. Being a 15-year-old teenage kid, she is very focused on herself, and this is a great opportunity to see how she fits into the community.
Good. I'm glad to hear it. And one of the barriers that we came up against is volunteer activities for kids under the age of 18. Can be a challenge because of the legal aspects and liability and so on and so forth. So we've been working with CUvolunteer.org to help identify which opportunities are available to kids under the age of 18. And we also try to, we have a regular newsletter that goes out to the kids, and we have a Facebook page. Well, our kids have volunteered at the marathon. On New Year's Eve, they did a Christmas party at Clark Lindsay. We did the Crazy K, and so the other thing we're trying to do, because of potential barriers for kids who don't have access to after-school transportation, is volunteer activities that are actually occurring at the building. So we have kids, for example, at Centennial High School who are working with disabled children to help them with lunch, and that counts. They get volunteer credits for that way. We've put volunteer kids together for, it's not unusual in the Latino community that kids have to go home after school to take care of their siblings. So they aren't necessarily available to volunteer after school. So we're putting kids together for those kids to take home and do, and still count as volunteer activities. So there have been a lot of things we've learned. Whoops, I just came unconnected, maybe. Oh, wow. We really came unconnected. But the battery's still working, so I'm assuming I'm still good. All right. I think we just slide this on. So anyway, we've learned a lot. We've learned a lot. Any other questions? I think this is just supposed to slide.
That's okay.
Technology. Tell you what.
Looks like it's back together. Do your demographics reflect the population as a whole? That is, the historically underrepresented groups are proportional to the population?
Yes, they do. And in fact, our biggest challenge has been to retain the high-achieving kid. Again, it's the what's in it for me. So that's very interesting. And I think we probably and we just got data from both of the districts, so we're just starting to kind of understand who our kids are. But that's been interesting. We had 80 kids leave the program last year, and it was because they didn't come to the freshman experience, and then they didn't do the makeup assignment. And the course of study committee, really struggled with this. Should we? And we thought, nope. It's too bad, we're sorry, but we're not going to water the program down because the kid chose not to do the assignment. Gave them all kinds of opportunities to do it. We've got like twice the number of kids in the program this year, so it'll be okay. But that first group in particular didn't quite get how important it was, and it is a required program. So, yeah.
I'm just wondering, in the idea of like, what's it going to do for me? Do you worry that if if everyone starts doing the program, like Cal is saying, you should really do this program, which would be great for the program, it would up attendance. Do you worry that if everyone's doing it, it would dilute the effect it has on the high achievers that would otherwise be recognized? Because I know when I was in high school, there was no sort of program like this, but I still took 4 years of English, 4 years of math, 4 years of science, and it wasn't because there was this program like this, which would have been awesome, but I feel like if I was a high-achieving student and there was a low-achieving student sitting next to me, I wouldn't be as inclined to work hard and stay with it if I'm going to do that work anyway.
And that's a really interesting perspective, isn't it? I guess we'll have to deal with that as we go along. I would hope, and I'm an idealist there, that it wouldn't be so disturbing to a high achiever that a less of an achiever is being recognized. But the motivation would be, I think, first of all, anytime we could connect some cash to the award, then all of a sudden you've got a different motivator. And one of the things we're looking at is for kids who successfully complete the financial literacy piece, is that they will have a free bank account. And in that bank account when they graduate with the debit card is cash. That's where we're going. We're not there yet. But I would hope that a student can still feel that they can distinguish themselves by what they choose to do in their post-secondary career. And what this does is simply open up the opportunity for kids to have more choices when they graduate. So I'm thinking for that high achiever that has already doing the academic rigor, then perhaps they will benefit from the volunteer component to this. Perhaps they'll benefit from the social interaction, because one of the things that we've had feedback from our freshman experience last year, they loved the fact they were meeting kids from other high schools. You know, you just don't think about that, but it's like, oh gosh, new kids, you know? It was great. So that was one of our best pieces, and so this year we're going to make sure that kids actually, you know, have some FaceTime from the other high school from, oh my gosh, across Wright Street. You know, so it's a big world out there. So that was really, so perhaps, you know, that would be a benefit. And for those kids who are working in high school, for example, have a part-time job, if they have an opportunity in their job app to say they're a CU Scholar and that business person understands, oh, okay, CU Scholar, then there's a direct benefit to that too.
I just wanted to add something there. So my daughter is part of the gifted program, and
Sure.
she is a very high achieving student, straight A+ student in her freshman year so far. And she did have similar questions about what am I getting out of this, and I don't know if that was really made very clear at the school level when she joined the program. And one of the things she wants to do is she wants to get a driver's license, and I told her if she got a driver's license, she would have to get some sort of a job to support at least part of the gas money or something like that. In order to do that, in order to get a job as a 16-year-old, I told her it'd be good to have something on your resume. So I stressed the parts of the program that would directly apply to her, volunteering and the job experience mainly.
And part of the sophomore experience will be resume writing, soft skill. Gee, when do I chew gum and when do I talk on my cell phone? And so, you know, those are all things that kids don't get in a prescribed way. You know, it's great if they get it. In fact, one of the things we found out with financial literacy is that kids who are taking AP economics, they get 2 to 3 weeks of basic financial skills. You know, the consumer ed kid has to take a whole semester of it. But the kids that are at the high level, they get 2 to 3 weeks of what's insurance and, you know, how do I break down my budget. So they're not getting practical knowledge at all. And so from that point of view, this can be very helpful for those kids. So, but it is important to continue to try to articulate why. Why should I do this? And I hope that our liaisons can help us do that. So that's one thing. And then, of course, the public, you know, as you, that's an important piece.
Sorry.
I was just going to add a comment. I'm sitting in on a class this semester of entrepreneurs finance, and it's been repeatedly stated that the best time to start being an entrepreneur is your freshman year in college. So that could be an incentive for this financial literacy stuff before your freshman year in college. I mean, most of them are seniors in the class, and the instructor said, "You guys missed the boat.
Yep.
You should have started 3 years ago."
Yep. Wow. See, and wouldn't it be cool if for our seniors we could offer a class on, you know, let's use Scholars Entrepreneurship thing. You know, of course, we're still unrolling this thing. I mean, it can have a life of its own. That'd be neat. That'd be a really good idea. We'll follow up on that. Yeah.
This is a way to like entice businesses. Has there been, so they have like this job shadowing, things like that, and you're talking about wanting sort of like a monetary award. Has there been any thought of sort of, because the whole product is to create better employees that are going to stay in our community, right?
That's a big part of it. It's a big part of it. It is. Workforce development.
So with these, instead of these, you know, job shadowing experiences, are you looking towards maybe trying to create like internship opportunities for these students, and then and have sort of, I guess, the businesses that donate get the right of first refusal. And so their donation is actually sort of the beginning, first part of the salary of those students.
Yeah.
So that way their money is sort of tagging this, and then it's sort of, there's a little competitive aspect because then the businesses can sort of pick from the CU Scholars, but then there's more opportunities.
Yeah.
So it might be some way to entice these businesses if they know they're actually, now they're directly getting employees this summer, the gap summer.
And I think that as we develop, that will be a reality. It was interesting, I met with the owner, Dwight Miller, who owns 12 McDonald's in the area, and talked to him about internships. And the economic climate right now is that the answer is no. I mean, internships are just paid internships in particular, is just, for him, just not economically something he's going to do. I've talked to other organizations, one being Horizon Hobby, that really doesn't hire many local And guess why, right? So yes, I'd like to develop that a lot further, and I think there's room for that development, especially as people start to see the payback. You know, right now it's very difficult to spark the imagination of local business and have them understand how important it is to help these kids have a vision of success too. You had a question.
Yeah. It sounds like most of what you're doing within the school involves getting the students to take higher level classes the school already offers. Is one of your goals at all to have new types of classes offered, new curriculum at all, like any sort of newer classes inside or outside the school? Is that even,
That isn't really something we've discussed. But one would hope that as kids become savvier and parents ask for more, you know, that sort of thing can be done. The curriculum is so school driven, you know, school and state driven, that I'm not sure we would have, as an outside organization, any kind of power over that. But that being said, we're designing our own financial literacy class, and we're going to put it in the school. So that's yeah. And in fact, we're working with Kathy Sweedler, who's the Extension, U of I Extension, and she's the one who's really helping us put this together. And it's based on the NEFI curriculum, the National, no, am I going to get that wrong? I can't remember the acronym. I'm terrible right now with names. But it's all about money. NEFI, National Foundation. F is Foundation. Anyway, NEFI. It's about money. God, I hate getting old. So anyway.
I remember stuff when I was young.
It's pathetic. Anyway, so any other questions? It looks like it's time for people to roll out.
Well, there's still some questions to go, but we've already lost a few people, so I'll take this chance to. But I think there's still some questions
for
us.
Oh, I was just wondering, like, since the program is based on senior area, do you think like it will benefit from like the university student body, like, you know, have a role model for the students?
That's certainly a potential. Anytime young people are around a slightly older age group, you know, that can be very inspiring. And students, you know, college students coming into the high school is pretty cool. You know, people like to do that. At this point in time, we don't have any direct relationship with that, except that we've used several classes now over in the business school to help us develop surveys and data collection, that sort of thing for this program. But in terms of actually integrating into the district and providing support, you know, tutoring, Read Across America, I mean, there are lots of ways that students can get involved with kids. And I would encourage it, definitely, very much so. That probably made me think of something. Yeah?
So I'm wondering, if a kid, for whatever reason, gets drunk, or maybe they're not actually experiencing, they have too little GPA or whatever, let's say they just had a really hard semester, is there a way that they can like show that they're ready to pick it up again, or get back into the program, or if they transfer it and then they get in after 8th grade?
Yeah, there is. And what we worked out with, again, because we're small enough, with all three principals and the superintendents, is we do have an appeal process. And so for those kids who really struggle for whatever reason, and the word that is used is catastrophic, death in the family, serious illness, economic situation beyond control. You know, there are things that impact a kid's life that can really, really be a problem for them to maintain the status quo. So we're very, very aware of that, and there is a process for those kids. If it's one thing if a kid just says, I don't want to do it anymore, ooh, yeah, I do. So, you know, there's definitely an evaluative process that will be taken. And then for kids who transfer in, if they perform the academic piece, and you know, from their school that they're coming from, they can easily pick up the volunteer. The volunteer hours are only 80 hours for the 4 years. Some schools require a lot more than that. So this is based on 20 hours a year, which seems a lot, but for most kids, it's pretty easy to do. Especially if we can continue to provide opportunities. And you know, some kids may wait and just do it all in their junior and senior year, or they, you know, so there's lots of different ways to do it. You don't have to do 20. So a kid who's transferring in could easily, you know, catch up on that. The only issue would be, and it has not been requested yet, is the missed experiences. And at this point, we're not going to be running those again. So if there's, for a kid who's transferred in, if they were going to do an assignment, maybe that would work. And we just haven't been asked about it. So we are indeed unrolling programs. For the kid who failed to do the assignment and had every opportunity to do, that's going to be a tough one. Because that was in May of last year. They had until October to make up the assignment, and chose not to, with several opportunities.
I guess my question is, like, I know a lot of times high school is really, like, volatile time for kids, so it might not be, like, the kind of catastrophic event, but they just had, like, one really depressed year, so they were not motivated, but now they're motivated, they're ready to get ready.
Yeah, and you know, I actually think it would be worth having a discussion with those kids. Once, you know, even this year we've got sophomores, next year we'll have juniors, to get some feedback on that, because what would count? What would be, and then what would they need to do to become back, you know, part of the program? Because like I said, we don't want to be punitive about this, but we also don't want to lower our standards. So there's a balance between, you know, what's it mean to be a CU scholar and that kid that just needs a break. So, you know, it'll be real interesting to see what happens next year. Yeah.
I'm just wondering, you probably don't have the data yet just because your program is so new. But when you do have the data, if you're looking at different middle schools feeding into the high schools, if you notice that like certain middle schools aren't preparing their kids for high school, your relationship with the district, will that be able to become a relationship saying like, these are where we see kids struggling, can we help them with this? Is that something that you could do in the future?
We might be able to do a comparison between the high schools or middle schools, but I would tell you that they already do. I think the districts are extremely aware of which schools are providing what. And not only is there a district building plan, or a district plan, but there's a building plan, and all of those are based on core expectations for each of our schools. So if they have a school that's underperforming, they know it. And so it probably isn't going to be our role to intervene at that point. It might be very interesting to see, and in fact, here's a little anecdotal on that, is that one of our middle schools right now hasn't sent in the number of applications for CUScholars that was sent in last year. And it's a different counselor. And so I've already contacted the principal and said, hey, you know, we're just not getting the response that we did last year. You got any ideas on that? And mention the other principal's name. And, you know, so really, sometimes it is people-driven, you know, and it's something like that. So I have actually intervened at that level, because they need to, you know, they need to get those applications in, and they need to talk about it and make it happen. So at that level, I've kind of done something. Well, I think we've pretty much covered it.
I think so. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. And I am going to leave these brochures here in our newsletter.